Hey guys, welcome back to the Hardcore World. This will be the first project post-cathedral exterior. We will get to the cathedral interior at some point, but I thought I'd take at least a couple weeks off from the cathedral build to add some more small builds around the world and develop this kingdom a little bit. Today, we're going to be building a schoolhouse that I kind of modeled after kind of Victorian build style. I want it to look like a boarding school from something like, Matilda or Queen's Gambit. One of those schools that doesn't necessarily have the best connotations, but they look so cool. So that's what we're going to be building up today. I don't think we're going to get to the redstone part because I want to put a villager breeder inside of it. So it can be like these villagers graduating from this boarding school and coming out into their final place in the world. But for now, why don't we just build up the exterior, and then I will show you a little bit of my design process, and it should be a fun episode. So let's switch into stream highlight mode and recap some of the progress I've made over on Twitch on this boarding school exterior. I hope you enjoy, and make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel if you're not already, and follow me on Twitch if you want to see some of this stuff done live. Let's go. So here it is. I really like how this thing turned out. Usually I use a texture pack called Stay True that makes the bricks look a little bit darker and more varied in texture. And I think it looks a little bit better with it, but it honestly looks really good in default textures too. This build is much more detailed than a lot of the other builds I've been doing. So why don't we talk about my design process for this thing a little bit. With smaller builds like this, the design process is totally different than something massive like this that isn't even loading in right now. Basically, with large builds like this, you can get all sorts of layers and interesting shapes and stuff just out of full blocks because of the scale of the build. It's basically a higher resolution canvas to get interesting shapes and stuff out of. But for smaller builds like this, it's really hard to get a lot of layers and interesting shapes with full blocks. So instead, we use all these unique blocks, right? So stairs, slabs, obviously full blocks are all kind of the main building blocks, but you'll notice a lot of the detail blocks are some of the weirder shaped blocks. The obvious ones are walls. Walls add a little bit more depth because they're almost like a mini block, and they look like more like columns. So for example, we have lots of columns in this build, but they can be done with full blocks since this is such a big build. For smaller builds like this, walls are a great substitution for columns. And these fence gates are one of the weirdest looking blocks. One thing I always talk about is you want to learn how to utilize weird-looking blocks. Same with anvils. The anvils don't fit super well in this build. I think they do add a decent amount to the windowsills here. But as you can see, anvils are one of the weirdest shaped blocks in the game, which makes them kind of indispensable. Like I said, same with hoppers. A lot of people don't utilize hoppers in aesthetic builds, but hoppers are incredibly useful just because they're such a weird-shaped block. And of course, fence gates. I don't necessarily know what they're supposed to look like in this build, but they look good. Some kind of shutters or something that come down, or blinds. I'm not totally sure, but it looks cool. And same with the anvils. I think it's some kind of like windowsill, but like reinforced with iron. Who knows what it's supposed to look like. But using these more weird shaped blocks, you really get a lot more depth and interest and different shapes out of this. That's kind of what I was thinking when I was doing this. As you can see, the base is brick, but you don't really see too much of the brick, right? Because we have all these like big columns coming out in front, these little columns around the windows, and the trim around each one of these windows. So although it is just a normal brick wall, we add so many layers in front of it that it really looks a lot more intricate and interesting. And then of course we have these little sections that are much more sheer walls, which add a little bit of contrast and change it up. This build is mostly symmetrical, but I decided to go asymmetrical and put a bell tower up there. There's gonna be a bell in there eventually, but I didn't have a bell at the moment. So there are some details that I haven't done yet. There's a lot of trapdoor shenanigans that I want to put in to improve the horizontal plane. Because right now I think the vertical plane is looking really good. We have all sorts of depth and stuff, but the horizontal plane is a little bit simple, so I want to add some more slabs and some trapdoors and stuff to add a little bit more interest there. But let's talk about the shape of this thing, because this is a very interesting shape. Let's turn off shaders, because we're going to get a lot of lag once we start flying around. And this thing has a very strange shape. Basically, it's almost like an angel shape, and I actually don't particularly like how this back looks from above, but the reason I went with this kind of shape is for the sight from the ground. So I think this is a better angle. Yes, this is a really good angle. So you can see we have these normal windows that kind of match the windows over there, but we can have this totally different kind of warehouse style roof up here on top that really adds a lot of interest and shape. Now I've talked about this before, but having diagonal sections in builds like this is incredibly powerful. It really just adds a lot of variations and way more possibilities for interesting shapes, because the whole idea of this floor plan was kind of just based around this front angle here. These multiple tiers of windows, just kind of almost like a semicircle front, right? And then I just kind of designed the back here to kind of match it. And this section right here is kind of interesting. The reason I designed it this way is because I needed a big open space back here, but I didn't want it to be, you know, this thin as this little roof right here, just going all the way back. So I widened it up with this kind of almost an angel shape. I think it looks kind of fun, but I really like that it is continuously diagonal for all of the build except that section at the front, because then we can keep kind of this window design continuous, and if we kept switching back and forth between the non-diagonal windows and the diagonal windows, I think it makes the front a little less special. What's special about the front is that it's the only section that isn't diagonal other than some of the roof in the back, and I think that's really interesting. I decided to go with a blackstone palette for the roof because I just love the look of blackstone with this kind of brick. It looks very industrial, very grimy, very kind of Victorian. I think it looks really cool, and it contrasts really nicely with the really light highlight blocks like these pillars and the stairs and stuff going up there. One other interesting detail I added was these chains in front of the windows. These are supposed to look kind of like those thin bars in front of a lot of windows in older European houses. You can't use iron bars to get this effect because iron bars are just too dense. It almost looks like a mesh instead of bars. So I think this does a pretty good job. I don't love the chain texture with this resource pack. This texture pack. I kind of want to switch the chain texture back to the original texture because that way it kind of matches like the anvils, and it's a little bit darker and really looks more like bars. But I do think overall this build does look better with the texture pack on. Let's talk about the interior a little bit because I have started planning it out just the slightest bit. Before that, let's see, where did I put my bed? And maybe we'll go to sleep real quick. There's my bed. Now that we have so much of this stuff done, we gotta start making the rest of our world look good instead of having like dirt egg farms that are overflowing. In any case, we haven't really done any of the details on the interior, but we've started planning out what the interior floor plan is gonna look like. So I've just used a bunch of dark oak just to kind of start planning it out. Basically, it's kind of weird. I really like the look of these front steps, but the problem with these front steps is that now when you come in to go down to the level where these windows are, you have to go downstairs. And that was kind of an issue in the beginning, but I figured out if I put a little entrance hallway here that's maybe kind of like, there's this entrance hallway in the Queen's Gambit School that I was kind of pulling from when I designed this. But what I think is interesting about this floor plan is that it really opens things up to have 3 staircases going off in either direction, and I think I'm going to even have another floor up here in this kind of square section. So we might even have more staircases intersecting, but I like the idea of these intersecting staircases going to different parts of the school. And what I'm thinking is this is going to be a staircase. It's going to be a slab staircase again because they're easier to walk up and down than regular stairs, and I don't know. I just think they look cooler. But this is going to be a hallway going to classrooms that are going to be in each wing. And what I really like about the idea of this hallway is that a lot of times hallways in Minecraft get very dark and sad. And I think this one's really nice because it'll have natural light coming through here. And especially with shaders, having those god rays coming through into the hallway. Oh, it's going to look so cool. The idea of having this nice empty hallway coming through with lots of natural light going into classrooms on this wing that will also have plenty of natural light and windows will really make this thing feel alive. And of course, up here is going to be the second story, which will have a similar thing, but maybe the hallway be on this side. I'm not totally sure. I haven't decided yet. And then back here is going to be our villager breeder that we might design to be some kind of big auditorium or something, or we might just close it off and have the villager breeder be hidden back here. But either way, I think this floor plan is going to come out really nice. Obviously, next episode is when we're going to probably do a lot of the interior and build up the villager breeder. But yeah, I'm really happy with how this build is coming out. I can't wait to start doing some of the landscaping and stuff, because we're going to have roads coming through here, and maybe even, I don't know, I have ideas for like a railroad coming through here, like a railway stop right here for dropping the kids off at their new boarding school, and all sorts of ideas that we can start working on here pretty soon. I kind of wish I hadn't done this build this week because I was a bit tired after the cathedral, and this was a bit bigger of a project than I necessarily meant to do, but I got a little bit carried away in the design process, and well, it looks great, so I'm happy with it. In any case, that's about all the time we have in this episode, but I really appreciate you guys tuning in. This was a really fun build. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. I'd really appreciate it. And yeah, that's about it for me. I'll catch you guys in the next one.